Welcome back to our Unity tutorial mini-series, where this time we're going to add art. So, if you've checked out our previous videos on this channel, you'll see that there's a pixel art workshop, and tomorrow we'll be uploading how to improve art in other programs as well, but ultimately this isn't focused on improving at art itself. This is mostly focused on trying to implement art within Unity. Therefore, I've actually included assets in the GitHub folder, so you can just access them there if you're not interested. But if you are interested, I recommend using something if you're new to art, if you're not that great with art or don't know any art programs. I recommend starting with pixel art at this website, piscalapp.com. And you can see that Piscal, and then you can make an account, but you don't have to. And essentially, I've made several assets, so you can actually see. Oh, sorry, not edit info, edit sprite. I've made different frames, and it animates the character. This is a little small, but just look at it full view. So he walks forward and blinks at random intervals. And I have it for the right, left, and then the idle is just like 4 different frames of each facing all 4 directions. And essentially what I'm doing is implementing a top-down tile set. So we've looked at the platformer, but today we're going to focus more on the top-down aspect of it. I've also built a tile set, which I've enabled a grid for, but you can see that each of these constitutes of a tile. So this is a wall, these are floor tiles, and then you have several enemies actually, which aren't technically tiles, but I just implemented them into the tile set so you could export it all together. Now, if you want to do this, I recommend doing 2 things. First is recognizing the size of each sprite. So you should know what the size of each sprite is, or each wall sprite, for example. So I generally keep them in a 16 by 16 size. So when I enable a grid, which you can do in the preferences here, I enable a grid. I actually set 16 pixels for spacing. You can do less if you want, or you can do bigger tiles if you want, but I like 16 by 16. It keeps it consistent and simple. And then each of those tiles you can build so that you can eventually use them in Unity, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. Another thing is, if you look at the player, you should know his size as well. So the size of the canvas, most importantly. And I kept that 16 by 16 as well. I recommend starting with a small palette and a small size. That's why I've actually implemented just a very minimalistic size, 16 by 16, and I used about 5 to 6 colors, not much more than that. The Game Boy, the original Game Boy only had about 4 colors for 4 different shades, varying in tints of green, I believe. But ultimately, the point is that you don't want to overcomplicate things when you're starting out with pixel art or starting out. I know people do like 128 by 128 and then they get overwhelmed when it doesn't look good. Actually, I started out that way. And if you look at some of my oldest builds, they look pretty horrible, honestly. If I look at what I've even deleted. If you look at this flame doesn't look good at all. So ultimately, what I've done is simplified the size. If I had dropped this to a much lower size, then it would have been a lot greater. And when you finally determine everything, once you've built everything, these again don't have to be the same size, as in the main character, the player, which I've made a lumberjack in this case, can be a 32 by 32, and the tile set can be 16 by 16. That doesn't matter. What you need to do, though, is you have to know that all the tiles are the same size, or if they are different sizes, you have to put them in different files so that you know how to split them, because it'll be more complicated if you don't. And you just need to know the sizes. That's why I stay consistent. That's why I kept it 16 by 16 for everything. It's also, even though the whole canvas is this giant 176 by 176, the initial tiles themselves are 16 by 16. That's the key part. And this will fit on one tile. So once you've determined all of this, you've built everything, if you choose to do so, I'll have these assets regardless in sprite sheets that you can just import into Unity. So you don't actually have to do any of this, but if you truly want to make your own game, then I recommend doing this. We've also shown how to make animations do things in other videos, so you can check that out. Well, ultimately, you just need to export. This is where you can download a sprite sheet. And in this case, since you only have one frame for this tile set, maybe you have more frames for some reason, but usually you just want one frame for a tile set and then increase the size of it to fit as many tiles as you need. That's generally how a tile set is. Then you can just download that. And the name will save as generally what you title it here, but you can probably, download, yeah, it actually shows what you can save it as, and then you can just save it. I just saved it on my desktop. And then the lumberjack is slightly different because he has many frames. So when you export, it'll show sprite sheet layout options. I just hold down the up arrow to maximize the number of columns, just because it's convenient for me to not worry about it. So if I have 12 frames, I'll have 12 columns. It doesn't really matter. You can download it just like this if you wanted to. It doesn't really change anything, but it just, if you know how many frames there are in your animation, it actually just helps you just to maximize that, so you only have one row and you can remember when you use Unity. Once you've downloaded those files, you can just hop right in to the Unity Miniseries or tutorial miniseries project that you've been working on, or consequently the Unity package that you've imported. A problem that I found in previous videos throughout what people noticed is that when they imported the packages, they didn't seem to work in some cases. And that was because what I learned was that the layers aren't automatically set. So some of the things you have to create the layers if they're not there. So I have enemy, moving platforms, platform, and player. Another thing is that the player himself has to be on a player layer. The platforms should be on a platform layer if you go underneath. And the enemies will be on their own respective layers. Flying enemy or the regular enemy, whatever. And then the backgrounds can technically be on the default layers, so that doesn't matter. And then there's something else called sorting layers here. So the sorting layers is how they're drawn on the screen. So when you add a sorting layer, you can see these are the sorting layers I've added: backgrounds, platforms, enemies, and players. So what it does is the first thing it sees, it draws first. So it'll draw the background. Then the next thing it sees, platforms. It'll draw the platforms on top of that. Then the enemies on top of that. And then players at the topmost layer. Now you can reorganize this however, depending on the order you want to draw things, but this is how I've organized them. So it sounds counterintuitive. It seems like backgrounds would be the top layer, but it's actually how they're drawn and not how they're presented to the player. So just, this is how it's shown. So you can just add those layers, and then when you go to the player, under the sprite render, or anything, enemies, backgrounds, under the sprite render, you'll see a sorting layer, and you could set that. Once you do all of that setting stuff, and then tags, those are important as well. So you should add a player, enemy, and flying enemy, and make sure the punctuation here is important. So player is lowercase p, enemy is lowercase e, flying enemies lowercase f. So I set those in the code, so that's why it's important to have the exact same name. So the punctuation doesn't matter exactly, because what the player collides with, you just set here. The layer mask, you can just select those, whatever the player collides with, and whatever the enemies collide with, and so on. But the punctuation does matter for the tags, so make sure you have those. So now that we've got everything set up and open, we're going to go to scenes and top-down scene. So I realized that the previous video had an event system set up, but this doesn't really need to worry too much about that. This won't really change anything regarding those things. It'll just be updating the art assets and kind of working with that. So now we're in the top-down scene, and when we play it, it looks like a platformer right now, but technically you have to view it as if it's from the top. These are the walls. These are the tops of the walls, and this is the player. And if you move to the left, you'd be facing left. If you move to the right, you'd be facing right. So you have to reorient your view to not think of this to look like a platformer. It's a top-down scene. So we're going to change some things. First of all, let's resize the player to have a scale of 1. And when you do that, you'll be more square, and it'll be more convenient because now you have tiles. So once you have a tile like this, you should see that it fits one unity tile about perfectly, just because we set it at that scale. And the box collider will fit that, and because of that, the raycast will update accordingly. And yeah, it should still work pretty smoothly. Now that we've done that, I'm gonna save, and I'm going to drag in some sprites. So right now we only have the square. So under here, you can actually go to your folders where you saved your images. So I have this desktop, I have the lumberjack back, front, idle, left, right, and the tile set. So I have several of these. I'm going to drag them all in. So these will be available for you, don't worry. Then under the lumberjack and tile set stuff, we're going to set those settings. So lumberjack, I'm going to highlight all of these. The way you can do that is you can click one of them, hold down shift, and then click the last one in the row. So these should be ordered, but shift essentially highlights everything from a starting point to the ending point. If you instead hold down control and click things, you can add them or select them or deselect them. So you can do it. You can do that as well. Oops, I double clicked that. I did not mean to do that. But the point is, once you select all of these, you can edit the settings here at once. So the pixels per unit, this is why you need to know the size. So you want the player to be about 1 unit in size so that all the tiles fit that player. So for that 1 unit, you have 16 by 16, so 16 pixels exist per unit. So that's why we set it to 16. And then the sprite mode is currently single. You want to make that multiple. The reason that you want to make it multiple is because you have animations going on, so you have multiple sprites in one sheet. And then you can change the filter mode here. You'll see something that says filter mode, and you change that to point no filter. So what the filter does is it smooths out things, but when you have pixels want to be precise, they want to be exact. So smoothing out things makes pixels look blurry, and because of that, it won't look good at all. So point no filter changes that. And then finally, compression. I set it to none because I don't want to compress anything. I just want it to be the full file, okay? And then once all those settings are done, so the sprite mode to multiple, pixels per unit to the size that you set it. In my case, it was 16. If you used my files, set it to 16. Point no filter under filter mode, and then compression, none. And once you've done all those things, you can just apply. And it should apply those settings. For the tile set, actually I should have selected this as well. Multiple 16 again. Point no filter. I should have done this all together, but you know, now you'll get practice remembering. So the compression, none, point no filter, that always stays the same. If you have multiple tiles in one tile set, then multiple, and then pixels per unit is just the size of each tile. And finally, we just apply. Now we have to individually go into these to extract and divide them into the multiple sprites they need. So the reason I said set them all in one column is because if you know the number of frames, you can just do slice and then type grid by cell count, and then you'll have 12, for example, to divide it that way. But if you don't remember, you can just do by cell size, and the size was just 16 by 16, and it'll slice it. So you don't truly have to know, but I mean, it'll, if you forget for some reason, it'll just conveniently slice it based on cell count. Either way works. And you click slice here after you do that, and it'll slice them, and it'll label them as well. So you can see lumberjack back 1, 2, 3, so it goes 0 to like 11 because there's 12. And then you just click apply here. Make sure you click apply because that actually applies that, and then exit out of that sprite editor, and you'll see if you now have a drop down, and the drop down will show all of those. And you do the same thing for the front, idle, left, and right. So I'll kind of show this one more time. Once you open the sprite editor here, you go directly under slice, grid by cell size, 16 by 16. So it should set it after doing it one time. That's why it saves you some time here. Slice, apply. Make sure you don't exit out of Unity. Make sure you only exit out of the sprite editor. And now this should have a drop down. Same thing with this. So you have to do these independently because, you know, they're different. But it follows the same principles. Once you do that, then finally we have the tile set, sprite editor, slice, 16 by 16 slice. There you go. It divides them. Apply. Now one last thing for the tile set, because I set the enemies in the tile set as well. I'm just going to change the name from tile set 8 to something like enemy 1. I'm going to say H enemy 1 because it moves horizontal, and H enemy 2. So enemy 1 and 2, meaning that this is an animation where it bobs up and down and it blinks or closes its eyes, kind of. I don't know if you call those eyes. And then this one will be V enemy 1. So you have H enemy 1, and then V enemy 1, V enemy 2. So this will be moving up and down. This will be moving left and right. So up and down, left and right, and then once we, names don't exactly need to be perfect. This is just to know what they are. Then we're going to apply. And that should take care of that. And now if you open the tile set, you should see H enemy, and then V enemy should be at the end. Yeah, right there. So now we're going to make some animations. So animation has a tab right here, but you don't have to worry too much about it. If you don't have that, you just open the window, under animation, there should be an animation animator. We need both those tabs, so if you open them, you can drag them in, like if you haven't, it's already there for me, so it's just gonna open it there. But you can drag them to their respective places. So animation and animator. So before we do that, let's jump into the scene view. Let's go to lumberjack back. Select all of these with shift and then highlighting all of them. Drag him in. And we're going to name this player B walk. And I encourage you to name it in this style just because we'll have idle animations and walk animations. And the idle animation isn't truly an animation per se, but it is a frame where he's frozen. So that's why I encourage you to look at the way he's facing. So back, which is B, and then walk. I'm going to save it. And you'll see that it creates these two things in your folder. Don't worry about that too much for now, but this should drag in. And if you did choose to play right now, you just have this animated sprite. You'll go through it because it doesn't really do anything. It's just a floating sprite there. We'll make sure that we set it to the player later on. So that's the back. We need to do the same thing for the front, left, right, and then the idle. So front, we drag in. So the idle will be a little bit different. I'll show you in a little bit. But this will be player F, walk. Okay, then the idle is slightly different because it has only one frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new clip and we're going to name it player, and in this case he's facing left, so player L underscore idle. Okay, and if you don't see this drop down, you might just have to like select one of these or something like that. And once you select one of those, this drop down should show up, and then you can create a new clip. The reason you only see the front walk and not the back walk in this, I'll explain that later, but you don't need to worry too much about that. But the player L idle exists. Now you have to drag in the left idle. Then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add a new clip. We're going to call this player R idle. Save that. Player R idle. Now we have to look at where the R one is. It's facing right. Drag that in. That should be good. We're going to create a new clip. We're going to say player F and then player B idle. Player F idle. That's when he's facing the front. F for front. And then back when he's facing the back. So you see this man is bald and bearded. And we're going to add a new one. That's pretty much the last one you have to make. Player B idle. There we go. Try to keep the same naming convention so it doesn't get confusing for you later. because the names will matter in the code a little bit. So once you have those 4 clips in there, you can just drag in the left and the right. So the left, you do the same thing as before. You select, and then shifts, and then click, and then it'll select all of those. You drag them in. This will be player L walk. So this time it's a walk, not an idle animation. And then finally, we got our last one. Player R walk. And yeah, that should do it. I'm gonna save that. And you got your animations. If you just played this, you can kind of see all the animations. So yeah, there's your walk and run and stuff. Now you could be even more complex and do different animations in all 8 directions, so you have the diagonals when you're moving diagonally. But I decided to use left and right when you're moving diagonally, and then only when you're moving vertically do you use up and down. So it shouldn't be too much of a concern. It looks pretty fine. But yeah, we can just delete these from the scene. They were only there to create the animation, so we can just delete those. You see that we have all these animations, so we might as well make a new folder. So click on Assets, right click, create folder. We're going to name it Animations. And then under Animations, we're going to drag in all these triangular ones, or just whatever the animations that you named, right? You put them in the animations folder, and then these are how you control the animation. So that's why you see an animator. Every time you make an animation, it makes an animator. So you'll see that one of them has the idle ones because we were adding it to this animator. That's why you only saw the front walk, because that was the only one with this animator. And then the other walks didn't have this animator. So you don't actually need all these animators. You only need one animator. It just, by default, Unity makes all of these. So you only really need one. I'm just going to call this player animator. So now that we have several of these, and I'm gonna drag this into the animations folder. Now that we have several animations, we can actually put in more. So we can, now that we have L, R, F, and B, let's set the front to be the layer default state, so he faces the front by default. And then we can just order them back, left, and right. And then the walk for the front will be right next to that. Then we need the walk for the back. So if you see B walk, just drag that in. Then there will be L walk and then R walk. So L walk. You can just keep it however you want. It's just easy for me to see when it's organized like this, so you can see all of those. You don't have to do anything else. You pretty much have this, and that's good to go. And you just save. That's your animator. Now you go back to your scene, click on your player, and you're going to add a component. And you'll see it's already showing this, but you can, if you search up animator, it should show up, animator. And under animator, you can just drag your player animator into the controller part. And by default, if you play this, it should just show the player. Oh, I also colored him yellow, so you can just color him back to the white, because now you don't need that shade anymore. So you do that, and you just play it. the animator will show the front idle as the default. And when you move around right now, the animator doesn't know when to switch animations, so it's just going to face the front for now until we add in animations into the code. So let's do that right now. So we can save. We can go in directly to the scripts, and once we open the player input, so under the player input, that's where we do it. Oh, sorry, we should go into the player top-down input. So we'll give it a second to open, but we're doing the top-down. So player input TD, that should be here anyways. It opens all the scripts. Okay, so as you can see here, what you're doing is setting the X and the Y. So let's add a couple booleans here, and we'll just make them private bools, and they will be face left, face right, face down, face up. Or you can do front and back, whatever you want. And then we're going to also do private animator anim. I'm going to name it anim just to save typing. And then in the start method, I'm going to add, I'm going to get the component of the player. Okay, so the player has an animator attached to him, so it's going to get that. So if you remember right here, okay, it's going to just compile the C# scripts. It's a little busy. Yeah, shouldn't really. Yeah, so if you look under the player, right, I'm just going to switch back to the console. The player has the animator component, so all we're doing is we're getting that component from the player. And we're setting it to this variable called anim. And what we're going to do is, if the velocity.x is greater than 0, that means he's moving right. So since he's moving right, it doesn't matter even if he's moving vertically at the same time, if he's moving diagonally right or diagonally right and down, he should still be facing right. So no matter what, if he's greater than 0, then we're going to do anim.play, make sure play is capitalized, and then under play, you just name it what you want to play. So in this case, we did player r_walk. So that should play it when you move to the right. Now if we copy this, paste right below, else if. So we're going to have a lot of if statements here. You could actually optimize this a little bit, but ultimately we're just trying to get something to work for now. And it's going to be player L walk when you're less than 0. And then we're going to do another else if below this. Else if velocity.y is greater than 0, and we have to make sure that the velocity.x is equal to 0. So that means you're only moving up and down. If it's greater, that means it's going up. That means it's facing backwards because he's going up. And then if he's going down, he's facing forward, so front. So we can add another one right here. Then just copy this right here. And if velocity.y is less than 0 and velocity.x equals 0, then we face forward. Now that we have that, technically this should work to a basic degree. So what's going to happen is that when the velocity stops, he's going to face the front, I believe. So you'll have this. Oh, it just stays in the animation. So essentially, you'll just have him running forever, even if you let go. So the animations play there. So we want the idle animations to play when he's letting go. That's actually why we created these booleans, face left, right, down, and up. So when he's walking to the right, what we're going to do is face right is going to be set to true, and the other faces are going to be set to false. So left is going to equal up, which is going to equal, I don't know why face up was capitalized. Let me lowercase that. Let me make that lowercase because I want to keep the same convention, just so we remember. And this right here matters, so if anything's not working, make sure this is titled the same as what the animations are titled in your thing right here. So okay, face left is going to equal face up, which is going to equal face down, and all of those things are going to be set to false. So you can do this in Unity. So you can just copy this and paste into all four of them. What you have to change though is what is set to true. So when you're facing left, you're just gonna make left true, right? That means right has to be false now because that's what we're replacing. Okay, when you're walking back, that means face up is true. Maybe I should have let me just rename this, just because it's confusing. I right-clicked and renamed. Instead of face up, I'm going to say face back, because it gets confusing because you're thinking of up as forward, and then it'll start getting all confusing. So this, I'm gonna right click, rename, face front. Okay, so all of these should change automatically when you right click and rename. If you just change that, you have to change everything in the code, so this just saves you some time. So right, left, back, so player B, and then front. And you also want to make sure that face back is not set to false. Now face right set to false here. And then in this one, face front is true, therefore face right is false here. There you go. Left, back, and right are false. Left, right, and front are false here. Right, back, and front are false here, and the left, back, and front are false here. That should essentially set the booleans, and then finally we just have to add one last else if. So I just, oh, not that. Just have to say else if. No, it's not just one. I have to do several. Face left and velocity dot x equals 0 and velocity dot y equals 0. That means you're facing left. That means we're going to play player L. Instead of left, let's keep the same order. So we did R, L, B, F. Okay, so let's do face right. Then player R, idle. So it just keeps the same order. And we just need to copy this and paste 3 more times. And we're just going to make this face right, then left, then front, then back. And we're going to just change these letters. So player L, RL, F, then B. Oh, I think it was B, then F. So technically we should... What was the order? Yeah, it was B, then F. Yeah. Let's make this face back. So I had right, left, back, then front. Okay, right, left, back, then front. Okay, now that we've got all of that in, our player animator should be good to go. Just look at this. Interesting. For some reason, player B idle. That's really weird. Okay, well, technically speaking, that just looks a little buggy, but it might not be too much of a worry. And then the player, you can actually honestly switch the sprite renderer to something like the lumberjack facing front. I don't know. This one? Lumberjack idle, yeah. Okay. Select that, and then you have that. And you can also change the box collider a little bit if you think that, you know, you want to be more precise. But technically, he's like about 1 unit, so that's the size that he essentially is in. For some reason, it's being weird and stop not facing back. So something is wrong with the back. What we can do is we can take a look at the animator here. Uh-oh. And we can actually watch what happens. Usually you can see like a... That's very strange. Maybe I dragged in front for the player B idle. That could be the case. If we go under the animation tab, This drop down is being annoying. Ah, there we go. So if I click the player, it should actually allow us to see the idle position. So, I didn't set anything for the back idle. That's why. So make sure you don't have these issues. Try to get that. So it didn't detect anything, so it didn't actually... So you have an empty animation here, so it doesn't actually run anything. So under lumberjack idle, this is the back one, and I'm going to drag it in. Yeah, I forgot to do that originally. Just make sure you don't make that mistake. And it should work now. So, yeah, it'll stop in the direction you're facing. There we go. Sorry about that. And now you got your player, and he can walk even diagonally, but he faces right and left. And he's animated in whatever direction you want. And if for some reason you want to mess with things, then you can go into here and you can change the speed of the animation. If you want to slow down the animation because it's playing too fast, then you can do that under speed for each of these, whichever ones that you want to slow down or whatever you want to do. I'm fine with that for now, so I'm just going to leave those alone. Now we're going to look at tile sets, which is a little more complicated. Or it's actually a little less complicated because there's less work. But essentially, what we're going to do is create a tile map, rectangular, and we're going to name it the ground. And then what we're going to do is actually create another tile map, rectangular, and we're going to name it walls. So essentially, if you don't see this tile palette in the bottom right corner, what you can do is go under Window, and then under 2D, there should be something that says Tile Palette, and you can drag that in. I always keep this in as a default for Tile Palette, and it's just convenient for me to paint in tiles. Then, to create a new palette, I'm just going to drag in everything that's not one of the enemies. So I'm just going to drag in everything else. Tile sets, and I'm going to just create new palette and name it, let's see. So the dragging actually doesn't happen yet. So let's first name this as tile set, main tile set, okay? If we have different ones, like let's say you have a jungle biome and then a desert biome, maybe you want to separate the tile sets, but for now I'm just going to make this and name this main tile set because it doesn't really matter too much. And we're going to create a folder, actually, right click, new folder, and I'm going to name this tiles, and then under here we're just going to select that folder and it's going to make the main tile set there. Then we're going to drag these in, and we just pick the tiles folder and select to drag them into there, and it should import all our tiles. So it's a little bit out of order, it's a little clunky, that's fine. We can actually reorganize this, so yours might be a little bit here or there. This is a left wall because you have this line at the edge that's the left, this is the right wall, and this is like a central wall. And I made a variant of the central wall with like a little space in between, just for variety. So what you can do is actually click and drag to select multiple, and then you can click edit, and then it paints that in wherever you want. So I'm gonna paint in this little section, and essentially it's just going to make it neater for me later on. And then I'm going to click and drag this section right here because that'll be the top of that wall. Click edit, and paint that in here. And I'm holding middle click to move around and navigate, so I recommend using a mouse here. And this is essentially good enough for one section of it. That if you can actually reference the original image if you are kind of confused. So what I'm going to do is go under desktop, Miniseries tutorial assets, look under tile set. This is how I organized it. And I should technically follow this to get an idea of how things look. So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna keep this photo right here so that I can see. Now that I have that part, I just need the long version. So that's going to be this right here. I'm going to put it on this side just so it's less confusing. And then going back, this right here. And then we have a black tile set. If you see this line at the bottom makes it known that there's an edge there. And then you can actually just pick to select something else. So I'm going to pick and then select this. Then paint around that. That gives me the top of the wall. And then you need this section right here. So I'm going to pick the left wall. And then pick the right wall. And then pick a middle wall. And you'll see why I'm going to so much effort to paint it in the order that I want it to. Because it'll actually make things easier on later. Something else that I can do. I'm just gonna paint a small section of just blank tiles. Maybe like a 4x4 section, because it'll be useful later on. I'll show you. Then maybe we want to select one of these tiles, which is cracked. You can see a crack right there. And then maybe we want to select this here. This will just help us later on when we need those tiles in for easy access. And this one small tile, we can actually select, place it right here, get the green and surround it. Now it's going to be like a small square. And then select again, gonna select that, drag and then select, and there you go, that is good. Now I'm going to select again, drag again, gonna put it up here. Now I'm going to I'm just organizing this so that it's understandable. So you can just spend however much time you need to get this right. Edit right here. So you can see right here the left edge and the right edge. And two edges have like a little small line indications there to know which tile they are. So when it's only on the right edge, you can select that, then that'll be right here. And then the one only on the left edge is right here. So we select that tile. And then I just need the central one, which is just this line with no edges. So make sure you don't erase any tiles and overwrite them. Just going to save right there. There we go. We got the giant one, and then we just select the green. There we go. The green tiles are just pure green. There's nothing else in them. There we go. We got some neat tile organizations. And that should be good enough for what we need for tiles, and then we can just erase the rest over here. These are kind of messy. We don't really want to look at that. This is way cleaner. So what I can do is actually, again, select, just paint it over here in edit mode, and then erase. And then we're good to go. I'm going to go out of edit mode, and then finally we've got our clean tile set that looks easy to use. Now that we've got that, we have this ground and walls thing. So I'm not going to select anything for now. It's just empty, it does nothing. So what you can do is first save, then under platforms, you can kind of look at all these platforms, select them, and delete. Honestly, you can delete the outer one as well. What we want to do is make the ground just be an aesthetic, because you walk over the ground, you don't want to collide with them, but the walls, you want to collide with them. So what we want to do is change the layer to platform for that. So when we set walls, that's what we do. So the walls are the green parts, the dark green parts. And this light green part too, because it's the edge of the wall that we don't want to touch. So what we can actually do right away is just select a giant section by dragging. You have the paint on, and then you can literally just drop it in anywhere because you have a tile map. And since it's a wall, it will, with a layer that's a platform, this will be something that you collide into. We actually want to add a component to this, which is a tile map collider 2D, and it'll add collision tiles, and that'll be under walls. So we can set a few sections like this, and then we can even maybe select something else, like you have something like this right here. You have some narrow pathway to go through. Maybe a section like this makes things interesting. Then maybe something right here. You can design a level like this however you want. I'm just going to finally add a square around this level. You can design it however you want, but it's just convenient to do this. Then I'm going to add some walls. So I'm going to take this for the left edge, and then this for the right edge, then drop in some wall here. That looks about good to go. And then what you can do is for this outer edge, because it vanishes into nothingness, you can just kind of take this, and the center will just be that. And then everything around will just be black tiles. So I'm just going to take this, edit the palette, so that I can get a good section. Because what I want to do now is just select all of this at once and just paint in big chunks. Uh-oh. So you can just press Ctrl Z if you mess up anything. Yeah. So technically these are all walls per se, but you don't even need to make these walls. You won't ever collide with them, so you don't need to put them on the walls layer. You can put them on the ground layer. And I'll show that in a second anyways. So all this green might hurt your eyes. Point is, we've got our collisions there. And honestly, this is good enough if you don't care too much. Got your tiles and got the darkness around you. So right now it's not like fully downloaded, so it's rendering poorly. You see these like breaks, but once you export the full game, those issues shouldn't exist, just because it won't be too much of a problem. But the other thing I wanted to say is that because they're on the walls layer, maybe the tile map collision thing might be getting a little too big, so maybe you don't actually want that. You want to erase that in chunks. There are the walls. Oh, erase. Whoops. There we go. So confused for a second. Yeah, you can instead now switch to ground, save, and then now you can actually just straight up select darkness, and this shouldn't actually add any collision tile maps. You can go as far as you need to go. This is like painting. And after you get outside the line area, you don't have to worry too much. You can kind of be a little messy. And I try to go pretty far, because if the camera ever reaches the edge, it won't actually mess with anything. So there's our level. We should mostly be fine if we reach the edges of the level. Reach the edge. Okay, the scale is making this look weird because there's gray areas to left and right, but technically those aren't really there. Okay, should mostly be fine. Hopefully you don't run into rendering issues while running this. That just probably means you just need a better running computer when testing. I also turn off gizmos. Maybe that makes a difference. No. Okay. For the most part, you get the point. You have wall collisions. Everything else works. Got those enemies still going on. Now, what we want to do... Okay, first of all, maybe we want to put the enemy between these two walls instead. And this one will be between these two. What we can do is set this to normal color. Set this to a normal color as well. Make the scale 1 by 1 for both of these. And then what we can do is actually bring in the V enemy and set that as V enemy. Then this controller actually can be added to, it's called flying enemy, but let's just name it V enemies because it goes vertically. And we will just add an animator. And then put the V enemy animator controller, and that should be good. I'm just going to move these to the animations tab. Should have closed this drop down. Okay. So that's in there. Then we can do the same thing for H enemy. I'm going to delete this from the scene. So let's go under tile set, get H enemy. We're going to name the animation H enemy. And save it. And we can drag these two under animations. Delete this, and then under this regular enemy we can just add an animator. Then under the animator we can just choose the H enemy, and we don't actually have to do anything else because they'll just continuously play an animation. So if we go to V enemy, they'll just continuously loop through this forever because it's in this state. So when I play the game, as you see, they're looping through it very fast right now. And they're also moving a little fast. So let's make their speed, which should be... Oh, they have different scripts, I guess. Let's make this guy's speed 5. This guy's speed 5. And then the animations, if you go under animations, you can actually, like I said, set the speed of the animation. So I'm going to drop that to 0.5 here. And then for the V enemy, I'm going to drop that to 0.5 as well. So it just halves their animation speed. So they'll be a little bit better, hopefully. Yeah, so they're just like moving up and down like this continuously. Now you got that. If you wanted to add more tiles, you could do so. And you just go to the ground layer. And then in the ground layer, you just select the tiles that you need from there. Go to the scene, drop in some ground tiles. I'm not going to paint the whole thing because this isn't a design tutorial. Like, this is something you can do on your own. But you get the idea. Like, you just paint all of this in however you want. Maybe you add in some cracks onto some of the areas. And then maybe this one. You have a couple cracked tiles, so not everything looks the same. Then when you'll be able to walk over these because these are under the ground tiles and not the wall tiles. So there you go. So you might want to paint in the whole level to look like that so that it doesn't look like a black screen. But if you don't like this tile, you can make your own tiles. I just made this quickly. You can do whatever you want to edit. Maybe it looks too bright and vibrant and you want to make this darker. Maybe you want to change some other things. I just made them greenish so that they could stand out, so this lumberjack could stand out because he's reddish. So there we go. We got our adding art, and that should be good enough for our scenes. You can do the same thing with platforming, so you just have to make tiles that are sideways, and then again you have the walls. Well, instead of walls, now the ground has collisions, right? And if there's anything aesthetic like a tree, you might put that on another tile map. So every time you just create something, a tile map, rectangular, just generally we set rectangular. You just add in tiles on the respective map. So if there's anything aesthetic, separate that into another map. So ground is aesthetic for us, and walls are not aesthetic, so we keep them separate. Then, yeah, you can do other things like fix this right here. But yeah, you get the point now, because I mean this technically is aesthetic, so you could actually just put this in ground. I don't know why. Oof. But yeah, there you go. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please make sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Give us any suggestions down in the comments below, and we'll try and cover them in the future videos. See you in the next one.